Hello all, Old Geek here, and today I'll be reviewing the scenario I used for a Halloween Call of Cthulhu one-shot, entitled Locked In, 5 in a Bunker, by the author Alison Saib. I think it's pronounced Saib, might be Kaib, might be Saibi, Kaibi. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your surname. Alison is a novelist and freelance writer for various RPGs, and I picked up this scenario from Drive-Through RPG, specifically as I was looking for a decent one-shot to play over Discord on Halloween. I do have a lot of Call of Cthulhu scenarios in reserve, but I have exhausted the short 1 or 2 session ones. So was this one any good? Let's find out. There will be spoilers here, so be warned of that in advance. 5 in a Bunker features, as the name suggests, 5 individuals who find themselves trapped in an underground bunker. Now, I played it with 6 players, so I had to create an extra character and extra handouts for that player. Not a problem. Initially, the characters are somewhat disorientated and remember little of how or why they are there. As the scenario plays out, they will learn that they've been taking part in a US military experiment aimed at creating a chemical that will help the US turn the tide of the war in Vietnam. A ritual intended to intensify the properties of the chemical has gone awry, and now they are trapped in a bizarre time shift, with that time disruption having attracted the attention of a foul entity that is now stalking them, a Hound of Pindalos, a creature from the Cthulhu mythos. Almost all of the scenario focuses on the group inside a single room, a safe bunker, with the emphasis being on the increasing tensions between the player characters as they remember aspects of their situation and they struggle to escape from it. The tensions are meant to rise, potentially provoking conflict between them. Thus, there is an emphasis squarely on the roleplay interactions between the group. The story develops through these, along with a series of personal handouts which are unique for each character, which provide developing motivations and prompt the players to push the dialogue in a variety of directions. But while their thoughts are driving them apart, in order to succeed, they must ultimately work together. Right, this is a review, so let's have a look at the presentation. Bear in mind now that this is not a professionally produced scenario. It is a low-budget, independent one, downloaded as a PDF from Drive-Through RPG. So that needs to be taken into account. I do like the cover image, though it does feature an error in the logic and the continuity of the scenario, which I will focus more on later. Internal art is extremely basic. That is to be expected in a low-budget product. There is an adequate colour image that is relevant to the adventure, but the remainder is simply generic fluff. The PDF runs to 29 pages, but it uses a very large font and there is a lot of wasted space. Yes, it's easy to read and to digest, and the progression of the necessary text details is logical and it's easy to follow, and that minimises page flipping. But the entirety of the product does feel as though it could have been reduced to 16 or 20 pages in total. Such is the amount of wasted space. Rather unfortunately, there are a plethora of typos, grammatical errors, missing words, and so on. And throughout, the writing style feels cumbersome. It is somewhat heavy-handed and repetitive. It's light on descriptive detail, but overly heavy on instruction to the keeper. The errors make it feel like one of my video scripts in terms of the time and care that has been spent typing it all up. However, my scripts aren't intended to be published, and I don't charge money for them. I know the author is an independent freelance creator, but surely it would not have been too difficult for a second or a third pair of eyes to have given it all a once over, as even my own ADHD addled brain was able to spot many of the errors on a single skim read of the PDF. One section of the text almost had me dismiss Five in a Bunker from the very beginning, and that is a somewhat holier than thou lecture on player consent right at the start of the scenario. The author makes it abundantly clear that the keeper must make sure the players are all okay with the subject matter and the likely events of the adventure, especially the potential for player versus player conflict. Look, I have no issue with brief content warnings when scenarios contain particularly unpleasant stuff. But Call of Cthulhu is a horror game, and some degree of gore and a sense of peril is par for the course. Plus, the game's sanity mechanics already contain the possibility of characters coming into conflict with one another. That's all part of the game. It's not all sweetness and light. I have an ever-growing shelf of Call of Cthulhu products, including some massive scenario collections and campaigns. And between them and the game rule books, there's maybe 2 or 3 pages in total referring to potential content issues. And those are largely with regards to specific settings, the class struggles of the Gaslight era or the racial oppression of 1920s USA. Spiel about the suitability of horror content is fine as well if the product is aimed at newcomers. And I would argue that due to the extreme dependence on the role play in Five in a Bunker, that this scenario is not for newbies. So for me, that's just unnecessary. You don't need to have a page on player consent in a scenario that is largely going to be used by experienced keepers. Perhaps the most bizarre instruction is a suggestion that the keeper does not pressure an unwilling player into speaking their part in the final ritual in the scenario, if they do not want to do so. Hang on. This is a scenario that lives or dies by the group's willingness and confidence in role-playing. If they don't want to read out a few lines of a ritual, then surely the session will already have gone pretty badly. Also, you need to take this into consideration. A horror scenario thrives on a lack of player knowledge. Pre-warning them of possible outcomes ruins the tension. So, no, I was not going to ensure that my group were okay with the idea of player versus player conflict before running this. I was not going to alert them to that prospect. They were going to have to deal with it in the moment, should it occur. The author also makes a number of changes to combat and sanity game mechanics in order to fit the desired style of play in this scenario. Now, I used the sanity changes, but I ran combat as per default Call of Cthulhu rules. And if I was to run the scenario again, I would go one step further and dismiss the sanity changes too. They're unnecessary, as while there is potential for much more sanity to be lost, they remove the risk of characters suffering from unpredictable bouts of madness during the scenario. I can see why Alison has made the change, as the final appearance of the Hound is tied to the PC's varying sanity levels. But I'd still throw all the changes out. A core concept of a game of Call of Cthulhu is the risk of a PC losing it at the worst possible moment, resulting in a feeling of helplessness from the player. And I want that to remain in the game. For me, that is core to a game of Call of Cthulhu. that "oh my god, we're all dead" moment. There are a couple of continuity issues in Five in a Bunker that lead me to wonder just how much the final draft was play tested. Initially, the party see a corpse in the room with them, and the description of that corpse, to be read to the players, includes a revolver. On the next page, the keeper is told that they need to make a spot hidden check to locate that revolver. We are also told that the hound will emerge from a corner, which is why all the corners in the bunker have been smoothed away. In terms of the story, this idea is that the hound will ultimately emerge from the corner of the eye of an investigator. Yum. But what about the window? Remember that cover image? Or the door frame? The cover of the adventure depicts a rectangular window, and there's no description of the shape of the door. Now, this gripe is minor, as I added these details, changed the things myself, but it still shows a lack of attention to detail on the part of the author. Also, what about any corners that may have been created during the passage of play? Such as by smashing the window, which is a possibility. It's a likelihood. The party are almost certain to break that window. The shards of glass. Towards the end of the scenario as well, the PCs are likely to encounter themselves from 2 hours earlier. What if two versions of one PC then escape? I would love to have seen some suggestions for playing out conflicts between two versions of each of the PCs and how that might impact the events of the scenario, as it could easily tie the keeper in knots. It didn't in our session, it was just an amusing sort of side bit, but I could see that going a little bit weird. So I've been highly critical of Five in a Bunker so far. You might think the session that we had was a bit of a disaster, but it wasn't. It was a lot of fun. The setup for the adventure is highly imaginative, and it fitted in a 3-hour online game slot very well indeed. The players really got into it. They got into their characters. It took a little bit of time to get going, but as it went on, it really developed nicely. With some refinement through competent editing, the removal of the unnecessary lecturing, and a little more playtesting to fine-tune those hiccups that we found, it does have the potential to be an excellent little addition to any suitable scenario collection, maybe even one of Chaosium's. Plus, in its favour, it is very cheap to acquire, just about $3 on DriveThruRPG, and it does make for a fun evening of gaming. I am going to give Five in a Bunker 5 out of 10. The lack of polish, the heavy-handed writing, and the unnecessary mechanical changes hamper an otherwise imaginative and entertaining little scenario. And with a bit of refinement, it could all be so much better. A bit of development. I mean, it doesn't have to be quite so short. It could be developed out. A message to the author. Less of the lecturing. Focus on the detail. Your ideas are great. The way you communicate them, less so. Well, that's been me, the old geek, with another review, a suitably Halloween Call of Cthulhu one. I hope you've enjoyed it. I post quite a few reviews on this channel, and we do live stream twice a week, most weeks. So come along and join us on those. Contribute to chat. I'd like to see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe. For now, see ya.